If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. They'll never know.
It's cold outside in Pittsburgh. The stove is still cold. Kind of what most of us expected it to be, a little bit like it was last year. You have a headlining signing that may need to break that ice a little bit in Juan Soto. Obviously not coming to the Pirates, but we're here to talk Pirates baseball because, we just must be that darn crazy as the snow is falling outside. Scott, how you doing today, brother?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to things warming up, at least with the hot stove, if not outside, because the snow is falling here too. And the Steelers are, at least at this point of our recording, are not looking the best. So let's take a little break from football and let's focus on our Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, why not? That's why I said we must be crazy because the Steelers, even if they lose, they fall to 8-3. The Pirates, we'll see what happens here. There are going to be some moves that the Pirates have to make, or rather, maybe some more decisions that they have to make. But let's celebrate a little bit here first. Paul Skenes, Rookie of the Year, third in the Cy Young voting, which to me, what is a little bit more impressive than anything. Not that he was not deserving of the Rookie of the Year, not that that's not exciting, but to come in third in the Cy Young voting, it's a pretty cool thing to see. Good for the Pirates, good for the city of Pittsburgh. But one thing I will say, because I do have to play devil's advocate a little bit here for just 1 second. The crazy part to me is the Pirates fans who jumped on and basically tried to rub it in all of the Padres fans' faces. Kind of reminded me of, I don't know, I kept on picturing in my head them making fun of all of the Pirates front office celebrating when they got the first pick. And it really, they had their choice of a lot of different players. Paul Skenes ended up becoming the slam dunk within that. But then going back and trying to dunk on a team who was one game away from putting the eventual World Series champions out of the playoffs, I don't know. I know that Twitter or X or Blue Sky or Facebook and all that kind of stuff isn't real, and you're on there just to get clicks a lot of the time, doing some engagement farming. But for me, it had the same feeling to it. Celebrate it. Don't dunk on anybody else. Jackson Merrill had a very good season for a rookie who had not played above AAA. He just happened to be going up against one of the best pitchers, rookie-wise, that I've seen maybe in my lifetime.
Word going around MySpace is that Jackson Merrill deserved it because he played every day. But I think that when a starting pitcher gets the ball in their hand, the level of control that they have over the game and their ability to shut down the other team and take control really supersedes the playing every day. And he was a great player. And that's the power of social media nowadays. Is that I'm not going to name any college football fan bases, but you know, sometimes when you don't have a beef with a particular team or a particular player, those supporters chirping can kind of turn you against a fan base or a team or a player that really doesn't deserve it. So the Padres fans got a little noisy about Jackson Merrill. And hey, by all means, celebrate your guy and talk him up all you want. It's part of the fun. But yeah, so I think that is, at least in my mind, it kind of turned me subconsciously against him. And I was waiting for him to fall, and I didn't even want the Padres to make the playoffs. I was like, screw them, because Jackson Merrill doesn't deserve to be Rookie of the Year. We got our guy.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not going to make it for any reason, it's because of that video that those five old white dudes made a couple, years ago or last year or whatever it was. And I could say that because I am an old white dude. I mean, for anybody that's ever seen me, I have a giant white beard. And, one day of cold outside, and I'm pretty sure every single one of my joints, I'm going to have to like start getting some oil like the Tin Man to keep it going. But yeah, I mean, for him, he deserved it. I performed extremely well. I mean, everybody knows the numbers. Every single time he was going out there, it seemed to be that it was like, this is the first time this has happened, since some pitcher from like 1910 or 1898 had been doing this type of stuff. I mean, most of the voters in my mind got it correctly. We haven't had too much of a discussion about this just because, I mean, to me, it goes on the voters. I like these types of things. I like to see my player win, but I think we even talked about this with like Jared Triolo, is that, I mean, in the end, I want to see my team win. So if this leads to, some momentum going forward with the pitching staff, with the team, with players that are added, with development, with everything else going in, then great. I mean, because guess what? I saw Jason Bay out there, in the outfield, and I saw him, win Rookie of the Year in 2004. And that was around the time when me and my buddies, I think we each had like a 20-game plan or something. So I was going to, countless numbers of games a year, and it ended up being all for naught. And I don't want to see that type of thing happen again. Obviously, I don't think that, I mean, the Pirates back then, man, were just absolutely, I mean, god awful. And some people may say that about that right now. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's more about the team moving forward. Okay, he got the award, got some national recognition. He, much deserved. But now it's more of kind of let's move on. But I mean, before we move on, we definitely, need to talk about, I mean, who was silly enough to vote against Paul Skenes? I mean, we got to talk about that a little bit, right, Scott?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have receipts here. So the but I think that the Jackson Merrill had a great year, was instrumental in his team making the playoffs. But I'm going to throw out a buzzword. It's a buzzword in all of sports right now that gets overused. But in Paul Skeens' situation, it is warranted, and that term is generational talent. That gets thrown around a lot, but he's beyond once in a generation. He is once in a century as a rookie. He's doing things that have not been done in the game before, and seven people decided that Jackson Merrill would get, um, deserved it more than Paul Skeens. And I guess I won't call everybody out by name, but by no, there's no surprise that because every team uh, is represented by two writers in the voting, and so of course both writers for San Diego went with Merrill. Hey, you can't blame them for that. There's somebody from Chicago, Cincinnati, L.A., San Francisco, Washington. But the important part is that he won. That Skeens won. He's getting his trophy. As he didn't seem that thrilled when he won it, but that's just who he is. And I think that having never met him, but based on what I've heard and from him and what I've heard about him, the individual awards are great and all. But I think if we see PNC Park packed in October and he's on the mound, I think that that's where you're really going to see the excitement come from him.
Yeah, and for him, I think it's just more of just like a humble nature. Because I mean, you saw pictures of him afterwards where it was like a little bit more candid. I mean, obviously very excited. Put him in the lights on the screen, and It
Libby
just
was excited.
yeah, I mean, she was super excited, and I mean, and like I said, when she handed him his cake afterwards and everything, I mean, we saw the smile on his face. So I mean, he obviously is. I think in some ways is also like respectful of the moment as well.
Hmm.
Um, in my eyes, realizing that there are, players that you're up against who are out there competing and trying as hard as you were, each and every day to go out there and give it your all, give it your best, and kind of leave it all out there. And it's almost like, what am I going to do? Like jump up and down on the couch like Tom Cruise did when he was dating Katie Holmes, dating myself a little bit there. Um,
I don't
you
think
know,
he's going
with
to be demanding an apology from Jackson Merrill for not being excited.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is, so I mean it's a good thing to see. And like you said, we're not going to call out everybody individually, but there was one person. It definitely kind of irked me a little bit, just the way that it was written and the way and the reasoning for not voting for Skenes just really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, especially from a guy who is a pretty much almost self-proclaimed stat nerd, in Dan Zamborski, who is the creator of Zips, something that as a stat nerd myself, like kind of look and see, and he has all these formulas and different stuff like that. To then, when you're voting for this award, to write an article that says, okay, well, Skeens beat him out in B War, um, but Merrill beat Skeens out in F War, but that's not the reason I'm voting for Merrill. Here's the reason I'm voting for Merrill. So you just basically took all the stats and just threw them out and said, how hard must it have been for Merrill to come up and to like get thrown into a new position for a team that had just lost Juan Soto, and where was he going to fit in, and how well that he had a great year. But you're also saying, with Paul Skeens, where there's no pressure like stepping on the mound because you're on a team that isn't performing very well. And so, where is all this stuff? And that's basically what he wrote, was just that, okay, well, Merrill had to overcome more and Skeens didn't. How hard is it to come out there and stand on the mound when you know that your team is going to give you absolutely zero run support? And if you give up one run, because we saw him after some of those games where he got like a loss and was taking, like shutouts, no hitters, like into like the later innings and staying in to give his team a chance to win. And for your vote as a stat guy to come out because of a feel of what Merrill had to, well, Merrill also was on a team that was one game away from knocking the Dodgers out of the playoffs. A team that, even though they had lost Soto, was still stacked with talent around him.
Hmm. And
To
Merrill
me,
wasn't selling out games just because he was playing. Paul
yeah,
Skeens was packing PNC Park and bringing the Pirates into contention and providing that spark. So if we're going to do what he did and throw the stats out the window and just talk about feel, he put the weight of a franchise on his shoulders from the day he walked in the door. And all of the hopes and dreams of that season really picked up when he came up and he took the mound that first time. And so the turnout, just for when you talk about pressure and standing in the middle of the mound, in front of everybody, yeah, more people showed up just because he was on the mound. So talk about pressure, or at least for a normal person, maybe not for him.
yeah. I mean, there was other mentions of like the clutch hits that he had to push his team towards the playoffs and stuff like that.
That's a good point.
I mean, but there was a supporting cast
Yeah.
there.
Hmm.
It wasn't like he took the team and like put them on his shoulder and like carried them across the finish line. I mean, we're not talking about, a Bobby Witt Jr., like, 9+ WAR season. The guy had a good year, but to make it seem like that he was, oh God, I can't think. I'm getting so old now and I can't think, but I'm thinking about the player who led Purdue back in the day to the Final Four. It's somebody's going to like comment on this and say, you idiot. But
It's basketball, so you lost me.
Yeah, you're like, sorry about that. You're like,
I'm no help. Sorry.
no, I will get this at some point here. It will come to me. It'll probably wake me up from a dead sleep. But yeah, it wasn't like he was like the only player on the team. And you know what, Dan, I will still read like your zip projections and stuff. But man, you completely lost me with this one. And this is even me being just a Pirates fan. It's just that you took an award, which is pretty much a statistical award, and turned it into a feel, and it was a feel that I think completely missed the mark. Kind of threw in there that he had, he was an everyday player. Like it was just like every like bad analogy or reasoning that people came up for, this kind of happening. So, I mean, like I said, not going to dwell on it too much, but it was something that, definitely fired me up. And, you know, for a person that, you know, really like in some ways didn't care if he won. I wanted him to win, but
Mhm.
we already lost the year of control because he was going to finish first or second. So for me, as a person who decided a couple of years ago to, cheer for the name on the front of the jersey more than the name on the back of the jersey and wanting my team to win, yeah, to get me this fired up about something, it was very silly to me, and took up more time in this podcast than it probably should have, because I mean, like I said, the real story is Skenes, the year that he had, and hopefully the years that he has going forward. Obviously, losing that year of control, we got about 2 years now until we start to hit the lower ends of that arbitration. Obviously, once it gets to the longer ends of that arbitration, those numbers are going to go astronomical. But more importantly, this is about 2025. And there's some decisions that are going to be made here within the next, well, actually less than 24 hours, about some players that could be or not with the Pirates. We talked about it already. Go back and listen to that episode. We talked about, the arbitration decisions. But is there any feel that you have, Scott, here, as we've gotten closer, discussions have been had? Has your mind changed about any player specifically moving into arbitration, whether or not they will get tendered, non-tendered, or when people go back and listen to that episode, um, is it pretty much like, yeah, status quo?
Yeah.
Like there's not been any new stats put up. So let's just
Right.
put it
No
that
new
way.
stats, no new feelings, no investigative journalism to give us any kind of insight in the team's decision making. So I'm going to stand pat with what I had said before. I think that I do think that tomorrow we should see some kind of deal with Bednar, betting on him bouncing back, betting on him getting back to the Bednar that we know. If for no other reason there are a couple of reasons. One, to help him save face, and not have to deal with the arbitration process, which can harm relationships. And you want to have that player centric culture that Charrington likes to talk about. But I think that you bet on him being the David Bednar of old, and when he does bounce back, maybe you move him. So I think that either you get some room to trade him once he does bounce back, or you ride him out even longer and you get a deal on him. One way or the other, I think that we should see some kind of deal, at least 2 year deal, come tomorrow. De La Cruz, yeah, with 21 home runs, 18 before he came to Pittsburgh. Let's take a chance on him. I think that they can figure something out. And worst comes to worst, you just DFA him.
Yeah. And the other one for me is, it may be hard pressed for me to say, but I do believe that I think that it might be the end for Connor Joe
Agree.
in Pittsburgh. I mean, a lot of this is decisions are going to be made based on, what they hope they can sign, but also, players possibly moving to another position. We've already talked about it, round and round about Brian Reynolds. If he moves to first base, that answers a question, and Joe's not really needed. And if you would go out and get yourself what would probably be a more legitimate first baseman, then that's not really needed. Getting a little bit older, doesn't play as, great a defense in the outfield, and hits for the first 2 to 3 months of the season, and then kind of has dropped off the face of the earth. So that's like, I mean, I don't think that's really a hot take there. A
No.
lot of people are saying that, and like I said, it doesn't really fit. Um, it doesn't really fit the team right now. It doesn't to have that much money go towards a player who is kind of like a bench piece fill in that kind of turns into a pumpkin in the second half of the season.
Well, devil's advocate on that though, do you tender Connor Joe um, just to buy a little bit more time? Maybe move him. They don't have any big names really pressing on the 40 man for Rule 5 protection. Do you hold on to that spot for a little bit longer and maybe get a bullpen piece or somebody in the middle to upper minor leagues? Just maybe you have a taker on Connor Joe.
I mean, that's definitely a possibility. I know that his name was mentioned a decent amount this past offseason, when they had tendered him. I'm thinking that if there was some smoke, because it was from more than one of the beat writers, after a while, if there's some smoke, then there's more than likely fire. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing is if you can tender him and then get somebody who either can contribute this year or can add to some sort of depth within the minor leagues, it's obviously not, a ton of money. I think that, he is a player that fills a need on certain teams, the player teams that are looking for, that last bench piece, a guy that's going to get, 200, 250 plate appearances, a professional hitter. Cause I mean, he is very, very patient at the plate and will give you a professional at bat. I don't know what happens to him. I mean, I know like the other time it was maybe like overexposure to a degree. It just kind of seems like that, as the season wore on, it just wasn't his time. But yeah, I mean, if they do tender him, that's the other part is it's not like I'll be like, oh, that's the dumbest decision I've
Right.
ever seen made, just because, like you said, if you don't have your 40 man right now, it's like sitting at 38. And if you don't have anybody really pressing him out of that spot just yet, I know that people would say, okay, well, we have Billy Cook. So that is, your new Connor Joe. Well, Connor Joe is stuck in the major leagues. He may not be like the greatest player. He may not have produced what we hoped of him or wanted of him, didn't continue it throughout the entire season. But he's also a guy who's done it, for at least the past like 3 or 4 years now in the major leagues. So to me, that holds a little bit of weight over a guy that, has less than 100 plate appearances in the majors. So
Maybe you do tender him and then you flip him for a guy who's not on a 40 man roster. Like you said, just a minor league piece that could potentially help you in the future. He to me he feels like the kind of player that like the Nationals need right now. Just not to say a roster filler, but somebody like you said will give him a professional at bat and is the next Corey Dickerson kind of guy.
yeah, I mean, and the other part is, I mean, the Pirates did that, with G-Man Choi a little bit back, is there was just that, pressing up against it. Maybe, you're looking more towards the future, also just maybe looking more towards opening some space for some players that you are going to bring in. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that at this point in time, I mean, there's not too many guys that I would like, you know, go pitchforks and torches down to 115 federal if they decide to tender him. Like you said before, with David Bednar, I'm hoping that they can avoid this whole messy process and maybe give him a little bit less this year with like approve it for next year, even though it would be a 2-year contract. And maybe move him if he starts to perform well, because we've seen him kind of go up and down throughout the months of the season, and especially with the season he had last year. But, me and you, like, kind of sticking with the bullpen here, is that with David Bednar, we were talking about, seeing a lot of stuff out there about people saying, go out and get like two big arms or two, to me, what would be like paying for arms within the bullpen. And at least on my end, that's kind of never been, my mentality. And I know that, there are some relievers that make, astronomical amounts of money. David Besnar's, $6.6 million, if he would get paid that, is kind of pennies to what some of these guys make. But for me, we've got a lot of options here within this team, a lot of young options. And I'm not saying not to go out and, get a bullpen piece. But I mean, there's discussions of people saying, bring Chapman back, bring this player in. It might be like a 2-year, like $30 million deal for like a reliever. To me, that is, as a team like this, that we want them to spend more money, but we know they're not going to spend more money. I don't want another repeat of a player. Chapman was fine at times, was dominant at times, but was downright terrible at times. And we paid him $10.5 million on a losing season to then walk and get nothing for him, which is still one of the biggest pet peeves of my lifetime here as a Pirates fan. I hate that kind of stuff. But, I mean, what do you think as far as the bullpen goes for the Pirates and just kind of across Major League Baseball, like how bullpens are kind of built and how some of it is just not luck, but it's kind of like hoping that guys can reach their potential, if even for a year?
Yeah, I think that, in some organizations, they have money that they're a set amount of money that they want to spend. And so throwing money into the bullpen just to get to that number doesn't bother them that much. I was shocked when I saw the Chapman number when that came through. I was at Walmart getting groceries after work, and I looked at my phone. I was like, "No, this can't be right. We didn't we didn't sign Chapman for $10.5 million. We won't pay a first baseman that kind of money. Why would we pay a reliever that?" But it did end up being fun to watch, and getting on the other side of him. When I was looking through some of this, the list of names, I was more intrigued by projects than I was big name guys. With Brent Strom coming in as an assistant pitching coach, maybe there's an opportunity where the Pirates can get a deal on some guys, get some guys on the cheap, and fix them or unlock the best out of them. I think that's a move in the right direction to bet on your development instead of trying to get guys based on a reputation with no guarantee that they're going to live up to their previous play. So looking over the list of guys that like Tuki Toussaint or Genesis Cabrera, somebody like that, players like that, that maybe you can have not had the best couple of years recently, and hoping that maybe you can just find that tweak, but also not just going out and spending money because maybe a couple of those players where you throw a few, maybe a million here, a million there, or whatever at those guys. But let's look at like Joey Moretta's coming back, and Oviedo's coming back off Tommy John. I wouldn't throw him. We've had that discussion many times about not throwing him back into the rotation immediately. And if you decide that you want to do a Jared Jones kind of thing and you have a rookie break camp with the team, if Bubba just plays lights out in spring and you decide, okay, he's going to be in our rotation to start the year, then does that move Luis Ortiz back into a spot in the bullpen where he's shown that he can perform well? I think that they can, without spending a ton of money, without breaking the bank like they did last year with Chapman, I think that you can improve and put a competent bullpen out there and allow the resources go where they definitely need to be spent, and that's in the lineup.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest thing with like the Chapman thing was that, now you're, going to contribute, like I said, $6 million to Bednar, which isn't a ton of money. Um, you've got other guys, going to be coming up for arbitration, different stuff like that. And there's so many different needs. And the one thing we've seen the Pirates be very successful at is these waiver wire pickups for these bullpen pieces because, I mean, what you basically need them to be is to be lights out for a year.
Mhm.
And then if they're not at the next point in time, you have guys to kind of rotate in and out of that situation. Uh, Relievers, to me, I don't know if there's too many relievers in the world that are worth more than a 1 year deal. Just because of like the fickle nature of how they perform, an injury, whatever it may be. But for the most part, it's because you don't know what you're getting. And as somebody who, whose wife is a White Sox fan, basically saw this happen within their rebuild, where, they had gone, I think it was 93 and 69 in 2021. And my brother-in-law is calling me up and he's just like, all we need is just like a couple more pieces. And we're like kind of right there. And they're like, okay, we went out. Let's give Joe Kelly, 2 years, $17 million, coming off of a season with the Dodgers where his ERA is under 3. His whip is under 1. We're going to bring him in here. That's going to kind of put us over the top. The next 2 years of the White Sox, his whip was 1.595 and 1.310. His ERA it barely crept below 5 after that. And you thought that was like the end of the thing. Not to mention they had 3 years, $24 million, packed up into Kendall Graveman. Liam Hendricks was like 3 years, $54 million. And they put all of this money into the bullpen. And then when it came down to some of the other players not performing, they kind of had to kind of hold on to those players because they had so much of this money committed to the bullpen. And in 2022, they were right at 500. 2023, 61 and 101. We all know what happened last year, 121 losses. And I'm not saying that's like honestly, and obviously going to happen for a team that goes out and spends that money on the bullpen. But I think it's a cautionary tale because, I mean, even looking back at the Pirates of the early, 2010s, yes, we had these players that we kind of fell in love with and performed very well. But it wasn't like any of these guys were like the big name guys. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you were able to build, a team, you were able to build that culture within that bullpen, and you kind of in that aspect caught lightning in a bottle with some players. And the one thing I will say with Neil Huntington is when he saw that a player was not, he would deal them. Do you know what I mean? Like he would deal them off, which is something you kind of mentioned about, like, not holding on to players.
Yeah. Well, and with that era of Pirates baseball, I mean, look at the bullpen and how that progressed over time. As much as everybody loved Grilly, once he had used up his usefulness, they moved on. Melanson became the closer. Tony Watson, everybody just kind of stepped up to that next level. And when we talk about resources, let's keep in mind that the amount of money, roughly the amount of money that Aroldis Chapman made last year, is now going to Mitch Keller in the form of his raise. So the team doesn't necessarily get better on paper. We have some of the same players, but they're spending more money that way. And so that's something as we hold on to players. That's the other side of it when players get, signed to extensions, they are getting raises. And so if Bob isn't going to pony up more money, that's only going to make the belt tighter.
Yeah, and as we were talking like earlier on today, and then even before the show, I kind of kept on bringing up the Cleveland Guardians of this year, because I mean, I know that at some point in time I did an episode on the 2013 like Texas Rangers bullpen. I mean, obviously they did trade for Chapman at that point in time, but it was the amount of money that was like kind of put towards a bullpen on a lot of these winning teams and, very successful bullpens. And if we're starting to consider ourselves like this pitching factory, much like the Cleveland Guardians have been, I'm pretty sure almost like my entire life is what it seems like. I mean, at least since I was in college, so at least like 20 years here or so, where they can just get the best out of these pitchers. But once again, it's like kind of like asking for pitchers to have, kind of the best seasons of their careers. I mean, other than Emmanuel Clase, who we all knew is a, dominant guy, you know, don't ignore a little bit of what, happened during the playoffs. That will
Right.
happen to a reliever. But I mean, this is a guy that pitched 74 and a third innings. His whip was 0.659 for the season. That's absolutely insane. Like, that is beyond elite. As a closer, as a reliever, if you're getting down below that, one whip, you're having a phenomenal season. I mean, he was the elite of the elite. But they had one, two, three, four, five relievers who had a whip below one. And it's not like these guys are like big name guys. I could name these people. Actually, I'm going to, because I'm going to say most Pirates fans won't even know who these guys are.
Mhm.
Hunter Gaddis, Cade Smith, Tim Herron, Eli Morgan, all relief pitchers, some of them ranging from about 25, 26 years old up to like 28 years old, which, an older prospect, I guess, all had career years and pretty much kept their team in it and led them to the playoffs and almost the World Series. I mean, they do have Jose Ramirez, who's an amazing player, but the rest of the team, when you're looking at it, they're all like, I mean, Stephen Kwan, great year, but around that, they're like around like a one war, team for their
Yeah.
lineup. I mean, so like for what a good bullpen could do, and like I said, I still think we have some of those pieces. I mean, Kyle Nicholas, you have Carmen Majinski. Like you said, you have Dauer Moreta coming back. You have Johan Oviedo, who I think would probably fit better in the bullpen, especially this year. You don't know how he's going to be built up. I mean, look, JT Brubaker, who we traded, and a lot of people were mad at. I mean, including myself to a degree, because I didn't know if we had enough starting pitching. I mean, he wasn't in baseball this year. Like, there was no impact whatsoever. So you can't even really count on Johan Oviedo. But I do think there are these pieces that could perform well. Dennis Santana. Hopefully Bednar has a bounce back year. And that kind of turns this 76 wins. And we've talked about this before. I mean, I see at least 80 wins if the bullpen performs even okay over some of
Yeah.
those games as opposed to imploding. So, I mean, that's where I'm looking at. Like, I think there are some pieces that need to be added, but I think everybody's going for these home run hitter pieces. And for me, I think some of these things kind of happen more organically.
Yeah, if you get more consistency out of Colin Holderman, maybe he stays healthy. Majinski takes another step. Now, just to double back onto the Guardians, for maybe for our listeners who are more into the more traditional pitching statistics, the first three guys that you named, Cade Smith, Hunter Gaddis, Tim Herron, all had sub two ERAs in over 70 games. Cade Smith appeared in 74, Gaddis in 78, and Herron in 75 games. And per Sarah Lang's fantastic follow on X, um, the Guardians had the fourth lowest ERA for a bullpen in a season since in the wild card era. The fourth lowest ERA of a 2.57 for a whole season in a bullpen, which is so easy to get blown up. If one guy doesn't carry his weight, everything gets blown up. So yeah, just to add a little more context to the great stats that you put out there, um, yeah, I think that the pieces are there, and I don't think you have to break the bank to add uh, pieces that will contribute further. And it comes back to the same thing that we've been hearing from Charrington forever, is that the next big steps will come from internal improvement. Now that's going to run out. He's going to run out of time with that. Eventually, I would say, but at this point, it is still legitimate that improvements from, Bednar bouncing back, Holderman taking another step, Majinski taking another step, getting guys back from injury. If Santana can stay the course that he started last year, right there, you don't have to go too far outside the organization to have the beginnings of a very solid bullpen.
Yeah, and I just like I said, I just see too many holes throughout, the rest of the lineup to a degree. I mean, conversations that we've had to really invest, that much in a bullpen piece. Like you said, you
Right.
mentioned before, we're talking about like Aroldis Chapman giving him $10.5 million. Well, you gave Rowdy like what, like three?
Mhm.
If you give $13 million, you could have a legitimate first baseman. And I mean, I looked through the numbers. You could also have, there's certain players that people don't want to hear, but there was players that performed like almost as well as Chapman or better than Chapman. And one of those names I kept on seeing popping up right around Chapman's name with a lot of the stats that I was looking at was Bryce Wilson for the Milwaukee Brewers, who we let go. And they have him for pretty much like nothing, like pennies on the dollar. So I mean,
Mhm.
that's like the biggest thing for me is I think that Charrington may have, that's the one decision, not the one decision, but there's a lot of decisions I disagree with. But the
We'll
one thing
narrow
I
it
just
down to just the
question of,
one. Yeah.
yeah, we'll narrow it down to just this one right now. It's the one that I would say confused me the most was just that the amount of money a reliever was given when there were so many other holes on the team, and there are still some of those holes that still exist. And I think it's kind of come down to the fact that, like, even if you do have guys in positions and you can acquire a player who is better than that person, I mean, obviously, you would think that you should be able to acquire a right fielder that is better than Brian De La Cruz if they would give him, you know, arbitration or a tandem of Jack Swinski and Brian De La Cruz, somebody who would be more consistent if you would put some of the money towards that. But like you said, and like we've said before, not all that money's there. You're thinking you get rid of all this money. Well, some of these guys are starting to make more money on our team. So it's going to be definitely interesting to see. I think that Pirates fans are kind of looking for that splash play, that exciting signing. Kind of went splash play there because I'm thinking about the Steelers and what the score is right now. Haven't looked at it in a while, but almost like you want to see them because it's almost like they're making a charge towards something. But for me, you kind of have to be smart about those signings.
Yeah. The amount of money that they spent on Aroldis Chapman, but wouldn't spend that same money on Carlos Santana, who's a switch hitting first baseman who performed well for you, Glove finalist that year. They really prioritized, and you got to wonder exactly what happened. I know that I'm in a fantasy baseball league that's auction style, and sometimes you just get in your head, I'm not going to lose this player. So if another team offered him, maybe the Pirates had an offer of 9.5, and another team came up with 10. Okay, we'll do 10.5. We got to have this guy, even though it may not necessarily make the most financial sense, especially in the market that you're in.
Yeah, if you're bidding on cattle, don't bring Ben Cherington.
Hip, hip. Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say